Hi, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Good News Conversations here on the Albuquerque Journal Podcast Network. I'm your host, Good News reporter Gino Gutierrez, flying solo on this episode, but don't be afraid. We still got plenty of good news to touch on as we do a recap of some of the columns I've written over the past week and a half. And to start this one, I really want to start with a very cool story I did at the Albuquerque Museum involving Pictures of Hope. Now, Pictures of Hope is a very cool program that's been running for the last decade, and it involves getting children who are struggling with housing and homelessness involved in photography. Now, many of these kids that were involved in this program were photographers for the first time. So it was really, really interesting to see how these kids went about taking photos. And the theme that they covered was a photo that really captured a dream or an idea of theirs that they really wanted to make happen. And a lot of these kids interpreted these in very cool ways. And a lot of the stories were really touching because this program allowed these kids to really take photos of things that meant something deep to them. And one of the kids took a picture of a mother holding a baby's hand. And the reason she chose that photo is because she wanted to capture the relationship between a mother and her child. And a lot of that was deeply rooted in her own struggles with her relationship with her mother. Another student took pictures of classic cars because he grew up really loving classic cars. So a lot of these kids had different interpretations of what they wanted these photos to be, but each one boiled down to their dreams and what they wanted to capture. And the awesome part about this program is these kids were able to exhibit and show off their photos to a group of individuals at the Albuquerque Museum. Now, I know I take pictures for the Journal, and I know we have a bunch of excellent photographers here, but for these kids, you could see the excitement on their faces when they turned around and revealed their photographs to those that were gathered because they had such a deep personal meaning to them. And the amazing part about the program as well is the fact that these kids got to sign their photos, and these photos were, people walked around and asked them, what inspired these pictures? And you could see their faces light up, and it was just an amazing event to cover. And just another example of the power of the Good News Beat and how we were able to kind of capture a story that not only meant so much to the community, but also meant the world to these kids. And that's something that was very, very awesome to see. In addition to that, we also covered a bit of clothing drives and food drives that happened over the past week. One in particular was the Seats and Feets clothing drive that was hosted by members of the Crossing Guard Department at Albuquerque Public Schools. Now, the really cool part about this clothing drive was these crossing guards had come together from 40 different elementary schools across the city to collect new packages of children's underwear and socks. And all of these packages of clothing were going to be donated to Locker 505. And it's very important. The head of the Crossing Guard Division, Richard, I talked to him a little bit, and he just mentioned how the Crossing Guards interact with these kids on a daily basis, and they understand their needs firsthand. And they partnered with Locker 505, a local student clothing bank here in Albuquerque that really dedicates themselves to ensuring that every student in Albuquerque they're expanding pretty soon to other parts of New Mexico, but their core goal is to make sure that children in Albuquerque go to school wearing clothes that's comfortable for them, wearing clothes that they feel confident in, because as Kim Kirshen, the executive director of Locker 505, often says, a kid who's wearing clothing that makes them comfortable, makes them confident, is going to be a well-rounded student overall. They're going to pay more attention in class. They're going to be more social with their classmates. And all in all, it's just going to have a very positive domino effect. So the Crossing Guards here in Albuquerque, they put in the work. Obviously, the public also got behind them as well. And that really made the Seats and Feets clothing drive a huge success. So a very awesome program here. Glad to be able to kind of spread the word about that. Get more clothing in the hands of these crossing guards so they can get them in the hands of Locker 505 so we can have more kids going to school feeling confident about themselves and just, feeling good about what they're wearing. But that wasn't the only drive that I covered over the past week. The other one was Stamp Out Hunger Day, which happened last Saturday, and it is the largest single food collection drive in the country. So it happens annually, and the cool part about it is it involves people we see often on an everyday basis and people who are already making deliveries, but instead on this day we kind of flip it on their head a little bit, and they also make pickups as well, and that's the U.S. Postal Service. So Here in New Mexico, we had 19 communities across the state get involved in Stamp Out Hunger Day, which involved residents leaving food by their mailboxes. So when their mailmen came by and they picked up dropped off their mail, they also picked up these food deliveries as well. And this went on everywhere from Albuquerque to Santa Fe to Gallup, all the way to Las Cruces. Basically, every corner of the state was involved. And these mailmen would pick up the food donations and they would bring them to their local food pantry or, kind of food organization that was closest to them. So here in Albuquerque, all the food donations went to Roadrunner Food Bank. A pretty obvious choice. Roadrunner Food Bank is the largest food pantry we have here in New Mexico. And the awesome part about these food donations is Roadrunner Food Bank unveiled that they received over 150,000 pounds of food donated during Stamp Out Hunger Day, which will go a long way to feeding not only needy families here in Albuquerque, but needy families all over the state, because Roadrunner Food Bank supports every corner of the state. They support Las Cruces, they support Gallup, they support the eastern part of the state as well. So a lot of individuals are really going to benefit from this, and it's really going to go a long way in making sure that families in New Mexico are fed, and it all was really done through community, which was really, really awesome to see. Another great clothing drive, once again showing that New Mexicans are getting involved and they're helping their community, and they really want to make a significant difference that impacts their neighbor or impacts somebody they don't know, but just ensuring everybody in the state has the clothing they need and the food they need as well. So two awesome drives, a clothing drive and a food drive that we covered. Pictures of Hope was also pretty amazing as well. But I also had two other stories that I thought were very, very impactful and definitely made me walk away feeling, a lot better about, the city we live in and the people who are just making a difference on an everyday basis. And I want to start at Matheson Park Elementary School. Now, Matheson Park Elementary School is in the Northeast Heights. It's the only Title I school in the Northeast Heights. So Title I schools, receiving additional resources to help with education. It's also a community school as well. And what a community school is it's a school that supports not only the student, but supports the entire family. So there's counselors at this school site that are providing counseling services for the family, helping them with jobs, helping them with food assistance, clothing assistance. It basically encompasses the entire student and helps them ensure that the student is fostering success, but also the family is fostering success as well. But I want to tell you a story about first grade teacher Jonathan Brannon at Matheson Park Elementary School. Now, he has had over 30 years of education experience, which has been, that's a lifetime for most people. It's longer than I've been alive. So he has a ton of background. He was a teacher, he was an administrator, he was a principal, a vice principal. Basically, you name a job that could be done in a school, and there's a good chance that Brandon has done it. So he went into Matheson Park Elementary School this year. It was his first year. He was teaching first grade, and he was brought in because the school had a first grade class size that was a little too large, around 30 kids. So the school asked if they could get an additional first grade teacher to come in and help kind of split up those kids to ensure that these kiddos were getting the attention they needed and the class sizes weren't too big. So Brandon came into the class, took over about 15, 16 kids in his class, and the first thing he noticed about his students is that only 14% of them were reading at a first grade level. Kind of caught him off guard a little bit. So when the school year started, he asked his students a pretty simple question. He said, "Are you guys kindergartners?" Which obviously kind of befuddled his first graders, a little bit, because they're thinking, well, of course we're not kindergartners. We're in first grade. He said, if you guys are not kindergartners, then why can't everybody in here read at a first grade level? Thus began a odyssey of sorts, and you'll figure out a little bit later why I use the word odyssey, to help improve the reading scores of his students. Brandon knew he had the skill set to really help his students. He knew they had it within themselves to increase their reading level. So he began implementing a plan. He began helping the students read. He began helping them expand their vocabulary. They began participating in word wall activities. They began participating in expanding their vernacular, their vocabulary, so they understood more of the words that they were reading in these books. And they also worked on their comprehension and context skills as well. So they walked away from these readings and learning how to read with more than just finishing a sentence, they could comprehend and understand the books they were reading, which went a really, really long way in helping these kids become better readers. So over the course of the first half of the school year, they went to work. Brandon was on top of them, made sure they were reading, made sure they were participating in their small group readings, made sure they were participating every time that they had a word wall activity. And each month, these kids would take a reading comprehension test that would kind of gauge where they were. And Brandon would look at the results of these tests, and he would identify certain what he called red areas, and those would be the areas that he would have the kids focus on. So they focused on those reading areas. They continued to kind of pound away, and they kind of developed the mantra of a rocket ship. And the reason why they did that is Brandon explained to me that he wanted his students to blast off into second grade. He wanted them to excel not only in their reading skills, but in their confidence skills, and make them the best students possible for when they got to second grade. And they kept working at their reading comprehension. And then finally, when they took their reading comprehension in December, they jumped from a 14% reading, first grade reading proficiency level in their class all the way up to a 43%. A massive jump in only a couple of months. But they didn't stop there. No, Brandon was not going to let his kids just be satisfied with the 43%. They continued to work, and they continued to grow their reading comprehension scores. And it was a massive leap for a Title I school, but it was really all owed to the work ethic of Brandon and his students and their determination to not give up and continue working away in every way possible to make sure they could be the best readers they could be. So in honor of all of the hard work they had put in over the course of the school year, they had a very, very special event take place last week. So the students had gathered in the school's library. They kind of had an idea of what was going on, kind of not. One of the school board representatives was there. The principal of the school was there. A couple of other APS officials were there. And they were all kind of sitting at the tables in the library, kind of thinking, I wonder what's going to happen. And then in walked in two very, very special guests. New Mexico United Community Relations Manager David Estrada, who was a former player for the team, and midfielder and defenseman for the United, Harry Schwartz. And they were there for a very special reason. The United this year has partnered with APS to hold a very special game event on June 8th, and that's Schools Out Night. And what Schools Out Night is about is celebrating the hard work that students have done this year at APS. And their reward is to get to see a New Mexico United game live. So Estrada and Schwartz were both there to surprise the students with tickets to the United game for Schools Out Night. And it was funny because when they walked in, they were immediately flooded with questions like, are you a soccer player? Will you play soccer with us? One kid alluded that Estrada even looked a little bit like Cristiano Ronaldo, which got a chuckle out of him. But it was so awesome to see these players interact with these students and see the excitement pop up on these students' faces. And it was just awesome to see such an amazing reward be given to these kids for all of the hard work that they did. So they talked to the players a little bit, and they kept the mantra of the rocket ship alive through a pretty cool little event they did. The students and Brandon's class had actually created a model rocket in black and yellow, fitting for the United, and they invited Schwartz and Estrada out to the playground to have them launch the rocket into the air. And the rocket represented the United season. They wanted the United season to continue to blast off into the sky, much like the reading comprehension scores had done for Brandon's class. So the group gathered together. They all walked outside, and they were running and kicking a soccer ball that Schwartz had brought with him, and they were just all smiling and happy and just having a great time. And they finally got to the playground, and they decided to launch the rocket. They invited Schwartz up to do the honors. So he and Brandon launched the rocket high into the sky as the kids were eagerly waiting for the rocket to go up into the sky. And as it blasted off, you could see all of the kids' heads immediately shoot back to keep track of the rocket. And then before you knew it, they all took off running to go catch up to it as it made a I guess, controlled landing, kind of slammed into the ground a little hard, but the kiddos all ran over to it, grabbed the rocket. They immediately ran back to Schwartz to ask him a little bit more questions and kick a soccer ball around with him. And you could just see on Brennan's face when he was kind of behind the students watching them interact with Schwartz, you could see the happiness on his face. And you could just see that he was so pleased that his kids did not shy away from the work. They continued to put in the effort. They continued to put their best foot forward, and they continued to work at their reading comprehension, and it paid off in a massive way. Not only are they better readers, not only are they blasting off for second grade, but they will be attending Schools Out Night at the New Mexico United on June 8th. Brandon will be tagging along as well. He told me that they are planning tentatively for a Peter Piper pizza party before going to the game, and those kids are sure to have an amazing time. I could not have been more excited for them. I'm sure most of them are going to have an amazing experience at that United game. Another story I want to touch on before I wrap up also involves a school, this one a high school, and involves positivity of a different nature. And it's positivity that I had not heard of before I went out to the school to kind of learn more about what was going on. And it introduced me to a term I hadn't heard before. And that term was a restorative garden. And a restorative garden is a space at a school created to help kids with interventions and mediation through restorative practices. Now, you may ask yourself, what's a restorative practice? A restorative practice is kind of a new thing APS has been doing in recent years, and it's an alternate way for individuals, for students to resolve conflicts within the school setting. And it focuses on discussion, it focuses on mediation, and it focuses on analyzing feelings and results and kind of checks and balances, cause and effect of the things that students might do to each other. And a lot of that has to do with focusing on open and honest dialogue, trying to get to the root cause of problems and understand why people are doing what they do, why students said something, and having the student understand, this is the result of something you may have said, and this is how it impacted another individual. And our story really kind of starts with Linda Kane, who's restorative practices manager with Albuquerque Public Schools Police. Linda Kane has been doing restorative practices for over a decade. She knows the practice in and out, and she had recently been called to Freedom High School in the fall of last year. And Freedom High School is a magnet school. And what a magnet school is, it's a school that accepts students from other schools that for one way or another were just struggling at that school, needed a smaller setting, a more intimate setting, smaller class sizes, teachers, more one-on-one time, things of that nature. So Linda Kane went to Freedom High School to help with restorative practices, to help with mediation with these students. And one thing she noticed while she was doing that is a lot of the rooms that they were in were very similar to the classrooms that these students were in all the time. The space wasn't too different. It was kind of like painted like a classroom. Like all of us, I'm sure, have a picture in our head right now of exactly what a classroom looks like. So Kane began brainstorming. How can I find a way to create an alternate space, a different space for kids to go to enjoy, to break away from the monotony of a typical classroom and have a space where they feel more comfortable, a space where they feel more welcomed, and a space that will really lend itself to improving the response to the restorative practices. So she began looking around campus and speaking with the principal, and she noticed that there was a courtyard off to the side of the entrance of the school. So Kane said, maybe that could be the place where we put the restorative space. We could make a restorative garden. So Kane enlisted the help of Lydia Williams. Lydia Williams is the restorative practices coordinator with Albuquerque Public Schools Police. And together, Williams and Kane decided to make this idea of a restorative practices garden a reality. So Williams had recently worked with volunteers from Walmart stores across the Albuquerque Santa Fe area, and thought, what better way to involve a community partner in a project than to ask if Walmart can come out and give some volunteers to help create this restorative garden at Freedom High School. So Williams reached out to Walmart, and to no one's surprise, Walmart agreed to come help with the volunteer building of the garden. And they not only volunteered individuals, but they volunteered tools, and they volunteered planting soil, plants, trees, chairs, tables, vegetables, fruits, and tomatoes, things that the students could tend to in the garden as they're working on these restorative practices. So when I got to Freedom High School last week, it was kind of a dreary, drizzly Thursday morning. But I saw roughly 30 Walmart volunteers out there along with Williams and Kane. And they were hard at work. Didn't matter how hard the rain was falling. Didn't matter how much the temperature was kind of low outside. It did not dampen any of their spirits. The smiles, the laughter, you could see that everybody was getting involved and truly believed in the mission of the restorative garden. And it was just awesome to see. Dennis Allen, who's the Walmart area manager for Albuquerque, was out there as well. And he just really touched on how important it was that Walmart get involved in a community project like this. And, they were planting trees. They were digging holes to plant flowers. They were setting up restorative circles with lawn chairs outside. And everybody was just having an amazing time. And it was just cool to see the community come be involved in something like that, and the Walmart volunteers, and everything that they did, and all of the chairs, all of everything was completely 100% donated to the school. And now the kids have a new restorative garden space at Freedom High School for them to mediate, for them to tend to fruits, for them to tend to vegetables, and then just overall just a safe space for them to be, which really, really meant a lot to Marisol Friga, who is the school's principal. And not only the school's principal, but she's also an alumni of Freedom High School as well, graduating in 1998. And she really talked about how impactful this was for the students. When you have a magnet school, it can often feel like that school is kind of small. Nobody really knows about it. But Marisol really just talked about how the students had walked up to her and really kind of asked, hey, what are those guys doing out there? And when she told them about what they were doing, you could see the look on her face. She got emotional when I asked her, what it meant to the students, because the students were floored that somebody would come and volunteer their time for them at their school for free. It really meant a lot to these students. And, Marisol was emotional. She wiped a tear from her eye and really just said that these students could not be more happy that somebody had come out of their way to do something for them. And it really made the students feel seen. It really made the school feel seen. And it was just awesome to see. And Kane and Williams are hopeful that this won't be the last restorative space they build at a school. They told me that they really have a plan to really implement this in a lot of different schools, every school that they work at, because they are really fervent believers that having a restorative space, a space dedicated to mediation, will not only benefit the students, but it will benefit the school and overall make it a more healthy place to visit. So those were just a few of the stories that I was able to cover last week. We had a wide range of stories, everything from clothing drives to food drives to, students getting awarded tickets to the United, all the way to Walmart volunteers and a few Albuquerque Public Schools police restorative practices, team members making a restorative garden, a safe space, a reality for students at Freedom High School. So that's just a few of the stories that we covered last week. We have a lot more scheduled for this week, so keep your eye out for it in the latest edition of the Albuquerque Journal. This is Albuquerque Journal Good News reporter Gino Gutierrez signing off for Good News Conversations, Episode 3. Feel free to check out this episode and all of the other episodes the Albuquerque Journal Podcast Network offers on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, and everywhere else you get your podcasts.